Welcome to part 2 of the Rena Aguilar and Bernie Swartz case. As a reminder, topics may be triggering. Viewer and listener discretion is advised. People mentioned are innocent until proven guilty in court. 2 sets of fingerprints are found on empty beer cans. One of the prints hits a match, Richard James Odell, who was already in the system. On May 1st of 1980, Detective Janke prepares a photo lineup including James Odell. Officer Hodge confirms that that was the man he chased the night before. The next day, Detective Janke takes James's photo to the Richmond used car lot where the van was stolen from, and the sales associate confirms James is indeed the man who had come in, requested to test drive the van, and ran off with it. This theft was reported immediately to Richmond police. Kathy Flannery is taken to the garage where the van was impounded, and she identifies it as the van that was parked outside her house. She also identifies the iron pipe as the bomb James was building, and the blue blanket belonged to her. On May 2nd, 1980, the crime lab confirms the fingerprints belong to James Odell, and the house on Merritt Street is searched. On May 3rd, 1980, at 4 a.m., police received calls informing that James Odell is driving around a yellow truck with a wooden rifle threatening to kill his family. The 1966 yellow truck, as it turns out, was stolen and belonged to the current mayor of San Pablo, Joe Gomez. At 8:19 a.m., 3 men got out of a blue car and head towards Kathy's home. Apparently, she had asked them to pick up some personal belongings. Officers warned them that James Odell might be inside hiding in there, and he was armed and dangerous. Officers search the house and find no one inside. Officer Don Donahue and Bernie Swartz report for duty at 8 a.m. on May 3rd, 1980 with the Pinole Police Department. These officers are incredibly smart, and it does not take them long to find the yellow stolen truck parked between Dolores and Hermosa Court by Seamus Creek. They see the truck is empty. The officers make contact with the owner of a home whose dog was barking furiously. They climb fences and follow a trail and continue across the creek. At this point, the officers are at another backyard filled with overgrown pampas grass, and squatting, hiding behind the pampas, they find the fugitive. Now let me back up and get into what actually happened, because a lot of what Kathy Flannery has told the authorities at this point is a lie, and she cannot be trusted. Somehow, she is still out there walking free. Kathy and James had known each other for over 15 years, not the 10 she had claimed, and she also failed to tell detectives that they were romantically involved on and off. She was married, by the way. In October of 1979, James is released from prison on parole. In April of 1980, Kathy Flannery and Rena Aguilar were roommates in Pinole, California. Kathy owned the home, and that was not a lie. James was a regular guest at Kathy's house. James told Kathy he was looking for a van or truck for a trip to Oregon. Kathy told James there was a van parked outside her house she thought was probably stolen. And she was correct. It was stolen, and James had been the one that stole it and taken it off a used car lot in Richmond after requesting to take it on a test run. The day of what would end up being the brutal murder of Rena Aguilar and Bernie Swartz started with James, along with his nephew Brian Odell and friend named William Moran, coming from San Pablo. James was driving the trio in his 1968 Chevy Impala. In the span of 6 hours, they were driving around Contra Costa County and drinking beer. At around 12 p.m., they all take a hit of LSD. At around 5 p.m., the pack drove to where the van was parked outside of Kathy's home. They got out of the Impala and into the van and drove off. James made a pit stop at a gas station in Pinole to make a phone call. When he got back to the van, he told Brian and William something to the effect of, "I want to kill that bitch. I'm going to kill that bitch." Brian and William did not know what he meant by that, nor did they care to ask. They met up with Jesse Raymond, and the trio became a quartet. They drove to a sauna spot in Berkeley and made an appointment for later that evening. James tells Jesse that some girl knew that he had stolen the van and was going to talk to her about something. After that, they make their way to the Berkeley Marina and then the Albany bowling alley. At the bowling alley, Jesse goes his own way. Now, once again, a trio, they go to their sauna appointment and head back to Pinole at around 10:30 or 11 p.m. William told James that he was stupid and was going to end up back in prison. James slapped William and stops the van. William gets out and hides behind some bushes on the side of the road. James yells out to him, "If you snitch or say anything, I'm going to kill you." James and Brian proceed to drive around looking for William for the next 25 minutes. They stop at a gas station where James meets Kathy, who was already there, parked in her car. James goes back to the van and tells Brian that he has to be at Kathy's at 11:30 p.m. to make a phone call. James and Brian arrived at Kathy's home. James gets out his tire iron, which is a mechanic tool, sometimes called a lug wrench. He enters Kathy and Rena's home through the unlocked door and stood by the hallway for his plan to come to fruition. The telephone rings and Rena comes out of her bedroom to answer. Remember, this was way before the iPhone. Back in my day, we had this thing called landlines where you would have to physically get an old school phone connected through a line on a cord on a wall. Most people kept this landline phone in their living room or kitchens. James sees Rena and strikes her twice in the head with a tire iron. Rena yelled and attempted to cover herself. The senseless attack made Brian feel queasy, so he left. As he was booking it, he hears James say to Rena, "This is what you get, bitch, for snitching." About 10 minutes go by, and Brian walks back to the house to check up on his sweet Theo James. His Theo was not done with Rena as he was choking her. The sight makes pobrecito Brian queasy, so he leaves again. After 10 minutes go by, and James comes out to Brian, gives him the keys to the van, and tells him to bring it up to the front of the porch of the house. James comes out of the house with Rena's body wrapped in a blue blanket and puts her in the van. His sobrino also obediently moved up for his convenience. Brian sees Rena still breathing, and instead of trying to talk some sense into his uncle and take her to the hospital, he tells his uncle to, and I quote, "put her out of her misery," unquote. James hits her a couple more times. Go to part 3.